Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Young Adult Mentor Chat tonight. Tonight we have 4 mentors to start off with, and then at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're going to trade them out. We're going to get 3 more mentors with the possibility of a 4th guest mentor. So in case you're finding this video and you don't know what pitchwars is, make sure you go to our website. It's pitchwars.org. We are an organization, and Pitchwars is an event where established writers and industry professionals mentor aspiring and up-and-coming writers and do a full edit on their manuscripts and then prepare them for submission. So if you don't know anything about Pitchwars, make sure you go to pitchwars.org, learn more about it there. Also, if you're just catching this video and you haven't seen any of the previous videos, or you're not watching this video live and you want to make sure you didn't miss any, they're all collected on the playlist that you can get to by going to bit.ly/pitchwarslive. So you can see all the videos there, and all the future videos that we're going to have are going to be added to that list as well. So without further ado, I am going to have our mentors introduce themselves, and I always forget to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Nicolas. I am the 2019 Managing Director for Pitchwars. I was a mentor from 2012 to 2017. I was a social media director last year, and now I'm the Managing Director this year. And tonight we have all authors who are going to be mentoring in the young adult category.
Are we starting with me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Julia Ember. I'm the author of The Seafarer's Kiss and The Navigator's Touch, and upcoming Ruin Song that's coming out next year. And this is my first time mentoring for Pitchwars.
Hi, I'm Laurie Dennison. I was a mentee way back in 2012. I was a YA mentor in 2017 and 2018 with Samantha Joyce, and I write YA, and I'm thrilled to be back mentoring this year again.
Hi, I am Rachel Lynn Solomon, and I have been a mentor since 2014, and I am on the Pitchwars committee as well, and I write contemporary YA, and right now I have out You'll Miss Me When I'm Gone and Our Year of Maybe, and my next book, Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, will be out next summer.
Hi, I am Rachel Griffin. I was a 2016 Pitchwars mentee, and I've mentored in YA in the past 2 years, and I write YA contemporary fantasy.
All right. We got to everyone, right? Okay. So I was just looking, the comments are a little bit delayed in getting to us. And so far we don't have any questions. So we're going to go ahead and start off with one of Lee Marr, our social media director's favorite questions to get us started. Lee, by the way, is keeping an eye on Twitter, and she'll be tweeting out random snippets. And then she'll also be bringing us, if any questions are happening on Twitter, she'll be bringing those over to YouTube so that we can see them. And one of her favorite questions is, what are some of your recommended resources to improve writing and also to learn about publishing, whether it be books or blogs or podcasts or anything like that? Feel free to jump in, whoever wants to go ahead. Nobody?
I think Susan Dennard's blog is fantastic for resources. She does a lot on how to write a synopsis and a query letter, and is just really transparent about the industry. And so I think her blog is super helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree. She's one I always mention. That post on writing a synopsis is one of the best resources for that out there. She also, if you look her up on Twitter, she just wrote a new article about things she wished she'd known about publishing. That was really great. So yeah, she's a great one to follow.
I really love the 88 Cups of Tea podcast. They interview all kinds of authors. They interview some editors, some agents, but I think that they ask really interesting and like interrogative questions that I find interesting both as an author now and also when I was querying.
I have gotten a lot of information from Dahlia Adler's site. Her blog has a lot of posts for writers in all stages. So querying, like pre-published debuts, beyond. Yeah, a lot of great resources.
And another one, Janice Hardy has, her blog is called Fiction University. And it is truly a wealth of information. There's so much there. It's sometimes hard to get through it all, but you can search and find great posts. She's been doing it for so many years, and it's everything from craft to the industry information, the writer's life, and that it's just, there's a lot of information there.
Yeah, I love Janice's blog. It's also, I think, so many times when we're talking about publishing resources, we're talking about ones that are specifically targeted towards publishing as a business. And Janice's blog has so much craft related stuff on it, which is awesome. So I had to restart my browser. Did I disappear for a second?
Just a second, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the comments weren't loading on screen, so I had to restart my browser. But Lee is watching. She wants to say hello. And we have a question. What is the most valuable lesson you've learned on your journey to becoming an author?
I guess I'll jump in. I think the most valuable thing is, and I hope this comes across as like optimistic with some realism sprinkled in. The goalpost is always changing. So right now, for people watching, like getting into pitch wars seems like the thing, right? Like that's the finish line. But that finish line just keeps getting dragged a little bit further away from you. So the whatever you're working toward is like constantly changing. And I wish I had known that when I started out, because it seemed like getting an agent was the thing. And as soon as I got an agent, I would be happy. And like, my hair would look great all the time. My skin would be perfectly clear and I would just have the best life. But that wasn't true. So I think just knowing that going into it and knowing that there are going to be struggles and stresses down the road, really that puts you in a better mindset now, and it better equips you to handle those stresses when they come up later on.
Sort of related to that, but not entirely the same. I think like for me, I wish I had known that imposter syndrome was never going to end. I think like people sort of expect that like once you hit a certain career milestone, whether it be like you get an agent or you get a book published, or even friends of mine who have been like in New York Times bestselling authors, like everybody still feels like they don't belong at some stage. And so I guess like just realizing that because you're a writer, like you already belong, so you don't necessarily have to feel that you're always chasing the next thing.
I think for me, it has been learning to focus on the things that are within my control, and being happiest and celebrating the things that I can control, which is the book and writing the book and giving it my all. We can't control if we, get offers of rep or if our book sells or a bunch of other things, but we can control the book. And so I think that's been what's most important for me, is just focusing on the things that are within my control.
And I agree with all of those answers. And I also think it's really important to have, oh, I'm so sorry, that's the thunderstorm in my house. It's really important to have writing friends, because when you're writing and it feels kind of lonely and you're by yourself and it feels like this thing that is just totally you're by yourself, having other people who know what writing is like in your life, which is why I'm such a big fan of Pitch Wars, because it's more than just the mentor and the mentee relationship. It's the whole community, and it's a great way to meet and connect with other writers. But having other people to share this with in your life if you have like a significant other in your life and they're not a writer, you can talk to them about it, but it's not the same to talk about writing and publishing with someone who's not familiar with all these things that we go through. And having friends who have been through it, who are going through it at the same time as you, maybe people who are a little bit ahead of you or a little bit behind you in that journey, that's really important to have people to talk to, because it's the kind of stuff that lets you know everybody feels that imposter syndrome. Everybody, like, those are normal things to feel. And I think I wish I'd known that sooner. It took me a while to be brave enough. It's really a brave thing to share your work with other people. And it took me a while to get there, but I'm really glad I did. And I wish I'd known it sooner.
Okay, anybody want to add anything before we go to the next question? I just want to make sure. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Go
the
ahead.
only thing that I'll add, Rachel, the other Rachel, already touched on it, but with regard to the only thing you can control being the book, the best thing you can do at any stage is to write the next book. And I feel like anytime I felt like I had imposter syndrome, or I was getting jealous, or I felt like, I would never get to that next stage, the only way I had a chance at getting to that stage, even now when I feel jealousy of peers, because it's impossible not to feel sometimes, we're seeing it constantly. I remind myself that the only way I have a chance at getting those awesome things that I see other people getting is to write the next book. Like, sitting there and crying is not doing me any favors.
Yeah, I had a tweet that got a lot of retweets. It was like, me to me, I want these things that everyone has. Me to me, you have to write the book first.
Yeah.
So why do you say such hurtful
great.
things?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Danny. How do you decide between multiple pitchwars submissions that you love? Do you look at which idea you love more, or which story you think you can help more?
For me, it's which story I think I can help more. If I have several submissions that I really, really love, it's typically the submission that I've been having ideas for, feedback and revision while I've been reading. And it's one that I have a vision for on how I can best help it.
I think for me, it's kind of a balance. Like, I think I do have to love the story, and even beyond the submission itself, I think it has to be a person that I think I can work with. So like, if I get the sense from the submission that this is an author who's really going to work hard and is really committed to their craft and to improving the book, then I think that's one of the most important components to me.
Yeah, same. I really take into consideration who that person seems, and like if they seem like they'll be a pleasant person to work with. Every year I send out like a little survey when I request material, and this year I'm co-mentoring with Kelsey Rodkey. I feel bad that I didn't mention her earlier. I'm sorry, Kelsey. But I am sure we will do something similar, and I definitely do a lot of stalking online too. Although I will say you definitely don't have to have a social media presence or even have one that is active. Like last year, my mentee, her picture on Twitter was of a bottle of Coke. So like I had no idea who she was. But yeah, I would say it's like kind of personality, and definitely if I have a vision for it.
I just want to say, going off what Rach said real quick too, my mentee last year was not on social media at all. So it's definitely not a requirement.
Yeah, and to touch on that briefly, my mentee last year also was not on Twitter or any social media at all. She joined after she was chosen as a mentee. So yeah, that if you're one of those people that you don't do that, it's not your thing, you don't have to worry that makes a difference, because we're gonna find the thing that we love, that we connect with, and that we think we can help. And I do really have to love the pages and love the story. And what's important about that is that we end up reading this manuscript at least 2 times in a kind of brief period of time. And sometimes we end up reading it more than that. So you have to really love the story. But if it's down to 2 things that I love, I'm going to pick the one I think I can help more, the one that I think I see the vision for. And on that note, I think going into it knowing that this is an organization for helping you improve, like knowing the goal is for you to improve as a writer, for you to learn. We're going to ask you to make changes, and it's going to be hard work. And knowing going in that that's what you're here for. You're here for that part of it, for the mentorship and for the work.
Yeah, and if I can add something super quickly, I do also take into consideration kind of like what the author and like what that book in particular would be adding to the YA world. So I'm really often looking for something that feels fresh and different, or like a voice that we haven't heard enough of. That definitely factors into it too. So if, there's between two that I love, but one has maybe been done several times before, I don't feel like I've ever been in quite that situation. But, uniqueness and freshness, whether that's voice, concept, author's background, that definitely plays a role for me.
Okay, I forgot to announce at the beginning in the chat that this video chat is happening before Wishlists go live. Wishlists go live on September 11th. And so the mentors are not allowed to answer questions about Wishlists. So they're not allowed to answer questions about genre, but they're also not allowed to answer questions about like formats or themes or anything that they want to see. So Melissa, thank you for commenting because you reminded me of that, but we can't answer your question. Okay, we have another question from Throwaway Beats. If I have over 100 queries out, should I still try for Pitch Wars?
I mean, my feeling on that would be that it depends, which is kind of like a wishy-washy answer. But I think with 100 queries, for me as a mentor, like it would really depend on the book, because I felt like we were going to change the book significantly enough that it would be something that was really fresh, then I might say yes. But if I thought that the book was already kind of finished and that we weren't going to change it so significantly that an agent would look at it twice, then I might say no, just because 100 queries is quite a lot. And ultimately, I'm not sure how much I would have to contribute to helping the mentee beyond Pitch Wars, like if they didn't find their agent through Pitch Wars itself. And I'm also not sure how many agents would recognize the material, but I still think it's worth trying, because you never know.
Yeah, I would say if you're debating between that and something that is ready but hasn't been queried, I might lean more toward the one that hasn't been queried. It, again, totally depends on the scenario. But if that's your only book that's ready, I think it's definitely worth a try. I mean, if you don't get in, you're in the same place that you were, a month ago.
Yeah, I second that. You have nothing to lose by entering, and if someone falls in love with your manuscript and they see a way to help it, I know for me that having a lot of queries out would not be something that would keep me from choosing a manuscript. So you have nothing to lose by entering, and lots to gain. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everyone else says. I think the only thing I would add is that if I were to choose a manuscript that had been queried, I would probably ask for pretty substantial revisions, just so that after Pitch Wars, when you went to query it again, you could basically say in your query that it had been completely revised and overhauled, so that other agents would be willing to look at it a second time.
Yeah, and what a lot of people do is when they're chosen as a mentee, they will email any agents that have materials, that have requested materials, and let them know that they're going through Pitch Wars, and they'd be happy to send at the end of it. And at this point, most agents, I think, are pretty happy to do that and wait for that.
And I would also think that most agents would be happy to see a book that has been heavily revised after Pitch Wars, even if they've passed on it, because they know that it's been a substantial revision.
And I just want to add one other thing. Sorry. Rachel mentioned earlier that she asked questions. I think that's a good thing to be prepared for because we kind of touched on that here. If a mentor requests the full manuscript or a partial whatever from you, you should be prepared to answer questions like this about how many queries you have out, what your journey has been, what your vision is for the manuscript, how you envision working together. And those questions are really important because it helps us determine if we would be a good fit for you. So I think it's a good thing. I don't know. I think some people don't know to expect that. So definitely be prepared that we'll be interested in that kind of stuff.
Okay. When comparing your work to another in a query, would it be acceptable to use a classic or should it be relevant to current times?
I think you can definitely do both. So personally, I love retellings. And so I think like if you were to compare your book to something that was a piece of classic literature, then I think you should also compare it to something current. So I think you can use a classic that everyone might know in order to like establish what your book is. But then if you use something current to show that you're aware of the market as it is now, and also like how your book fits into the genre right now.
Anybody else?
I agree with that answer. And I also just want to say, I don't think you should feel like you have to use comps in a query because I think it's better to not use them at all than to try to force something that's not exactly right. So
Yeah, for sure. Like if you're struggling to find comps or if you're asking people like, what would be good comps for my book? Like if they're not obvious, then they're probably not going to be good comps. I'm glad you brought that up, Lori.
I remember giving a query critique at a pitchwars live event at AWP, and the guy had used James Joyce as a comp. I just saw Rachel's face. Yeah, and and I was like, well, one, you're setting your expectations really high, but two, do you have anything more current? And he said, no, I don't like any of the stuff that's been published in the last 10 years. I was like, then your stuff's probably not right for the current market, So, Rachel. Okay.
Oh, no, that was next.
I thought you were saying something. Yeah. Where did that question go? Okay. Vanessa asks, as mentors, how do you identify good voice in the submissions?
I guess I can start us off. I think for good voice, it's really when I feel like I'm pulled into the story and not thinking about the writing, where I'm just able to read the pages and be swept up in the story that someone is telling, as opposed to thinking about the writing itself.
I think for me, it's often like something different or unique. So a different point of view or someone, I think in YA, there are a lot of snarky characters and I love a good snarky character. But if someone is maybe snarky in a way that I haven't seen before, like I'll call out my last year's mentee again. Her book opened, the opening changed for the agent round, but hers opened with describing girls dressed up as Disney princesses performing at a kid's birthday party. And like, it's so easy to make that snarky. And the first line of it was Cinderella needed to pee. And like, to me, that is just so funny. And it just takes this situation, it like treats that situation with seriousness, but there is like that underlying sense of humor. So it is really hard to define voice. I don't think it's something that needs, sometimes it can feel forced. I guess I mean I like what Rachel said about kind of being able to tune out everything that you might have to critique about the writing and focusing on the story. But I think a unique character, a unique point of view.
The next question then. Sarah, y'all are going to make me start calling on you by name. Sarah asks, when you're deep into writing, what healthy habits have you picked up on so you take the breather you need? For my current manuscript, I'm losing sleep over it, so I would love any tips.
Okay, I'm going to start. Or you want to go, Julie? This has been a big one for me personally, so I'll share some tips too, but I think we go through times when we're like, well, let me, follow this thing because this seems like the process I should follow, or what other people are doing, like trying to do what other people are doing in the process to get to the next step, to keep writing. You feel blocked, whatever part of the journey you're on. And the big thing I've embraced over the last probably 6 months has been, you know what, I need to do whatever works for me. And in that moment, like maybe it's the same thing right now as it was last week, and maybe that's completely different from the month before. And this speaks to things like you should write every day, or that you have to write every day. No, you don't have to write every day. You should do what works for you. So if you're the type of person that wants to write every day and that's good and healthy for you, you should do that. And if you need to take a break, you should take the break. So finding the parts of all this that work for you and that bring you joy and bring you peace and don't bring you stress as much as possible, because again, we only have control over so much in this industry, and what you do in your time, that's one thing that you have control over. So I've tried to embrace whatever's working at the moment. If I'm reading things that I really love, I've tried to get back into reading more. For me, when I'm reading, it helps me with my writing. So the more I read, it helps me write. And it brings me joy. So reading more is a big one for me, and trying to not feel down on myself if I don't meet my word goal for the day. That's like trying to cut myself a break with that kind of stuff. But reading has been a huge thing for me these past couple of months. It's helped me.
Speaking of reading, which I guess is maybe an odd segue because that's what all of this is about, I find that reading outside of my genre really helps, especially if I am like so deep in a project and then I read a contemporary YA that's been published. Of course, it's great. It's gone through so many edits, and I don't want it to read something amazing and then feel like mine will never be that good. So I will often take breaks with completely different genres. So fantasy or like adult romance or just something completely different.
I also read a lot, and I read a lot of nonfiction, focusing on craft, but also just inspiration and living a creative life to kind of help fill the creative well and get me excited again about, writing and making art. I also go on a walk every single day in the middle of my writing session. And I know for a lot of people, they probably write at night or in the morning, but being outside really calms me down. And so I will go for a walk every day and just think through what I'm writing and get that distance from my computer. And it's been really helpful.
So I'm kind of the odd one out in that I try not to read before bed. I find that like if I either write or if I read within an hour of trying to go to bed, all I think about is my current manuscript. So I try to not read at all within a couple of hours before bed. I might look at my iPad, I might play a game, something like that. Like Rachel, I also try to get a lot of exercise, especially if I've been really stressed, because I do have anxiety issues. So as well as like taking medication for them, I also try to do structured exercise. So I do spin classes and I also do bar. And I find that those things help even more for me than walking, just because it forces me to interact with other people. So even when I'm walking, sometimes I'm planning my book and I'm thinking about like what I'm going to write next. Whereas like if I'm in an exercise class and the instructor is like yelling at me to spin faster, and I can't really plot. So that helps me to disconnect from it.
Yeah, I play volleyball, and you definitely can't think about your book while you're playing, or you get hit in the face, which happens anyway. But okay. Elizabeth asks, apart from a lack of coachability, what other aspects might stand in the way of choosing someone despite a promising manuscript?
So like Rachel, I will also, when I request a manuscript, will send out questions. And if I get answers to questions that where I just get the sense that maybe we wouldn't be a good fit, or I always ask if there's something that someone's unwilling to change. And that's a big one, I think, for me, just because if my feedback were a lot in line with something that the person didn't want to change, then that's probably going to be like signal that we're probably not the right fit for one another. So I rely pretty heavily on the questions that I send out.
Yeah, definitely those questions. And for me, a lot of times it's not a matter of what's wrong with a certain manuscript. It's just that I connected more strongly to another. So I usually request like 5 to 10. All of those are great. There's nothing, saying there's something wrong with it that I wouldn't work on it. The whole point of pitch wars is to fix what might be, subjectively wrong. I'm putting that in quotes because, all of it is subjective. So it's more a matter of I connected really strongly to one of them, really believed in that author, and really had a vision for it. And it was nothing to do with the other ones. There was nothing like, it's sort of like a breakup. Like, what could I have done differently? It's like, there was nothing that you could have done differently. It's just that I could only pick one.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think the questions are important because I also would ask that question about, is there anything you're not willing to change? Because I might want you to change that specific thing, but if your vision for your work is that it has that thing, and the way I see it is that is the thing that should change, then we probably wouldn't be the best fit to work together because our vision for the manuscript is not the same. And my goal as a mentor is to help you reach the vision that you want that also fits with how I see that I can help it. So it's not so much that it's, I guess you could say it's standing in the way, but if our visions for it aren't the same, then we're probably not the best fit to work together anyway.
Did Julia peace out?
She is back now. She just
sorry, my internet just crashed, so I had to go restart the box downstairs. Sorry about that.
All right. Does anyone else have an answer for that question? Oh, I'll put it back up for you.
I hope I'm not repeating what somebody just said because my internet died. But I guess for me, like making sure that we had the same vision for the manuscript would be important. So I probably will too also send out questions. But just making sure that, if I wanted you in a completely hypothetical situation to revise green aliens into your manuscript, and you were really, really opposed to that, and you were like, no, I really want to put in, reset it in a land of waterfalls and make it not a space book, and we were in two completely different directions about it, then I would probably feel that we weren't the best match and we probably couldn't work together. So something like that.
All right. What do you do to find motivation when it's lacking? Also, I just want to point out we're about halfway through, and we're going to be joined at 8 o'clock by Liz Lawson and possibly her co-mentor Jeff Bishop, Olivia Heinbaugh, and Susan Lee. So if we don't get to your question this first hour, then we'll probably get to it in the second hour. But also, if you have a question that you already asked that you want to make sure the second group of mentors answers as well, you can go ahead and re-ask that in the chat. and then we'll answer this question. What do you do to find when motivation is lacking?
For me, and maybe this is an obnoxious answer, but for me, I have to write. Because I also feel worse about myself if I don't feel like I'm being productive. And that's aside from, of course, taking breaks when you need and all that. But for me, I get motivation the farther into a story I get, because I tend to get more ideas and get more excited about a story the farther into it I get. So I tend to find that for me, just making myself sit down and put in a little bit of work is the best way to get me excited about a story again.
I agree with that too. I have a couple of friends that have this motto, and they'll say it a lot. And if you follow any of them on Twitter, you've probably seen them say it pretty frequently. That's writing feels better than not writing. And so if that's true for you, if writing feels better than not writing, then that's one of those things to remember, that it's you feel better about yourself. If you're the person who needs to write, then that helps you. Another thing I'd add there too, someone suggested to me trying really small goals, like micro goals, like I am going to write 50 words today. And I mean, if you have a little bit of time today, you can pretty much get a couple of sentences down. That seems really small, but books happen like line by line, page by page, day after day. Like that will grow over time. So, again, I think it's what works for you, but to me, like it feels good to meet a goal. So if my goal is 50 words and I wrote 50 words and I even went over for me, then I'm like, yay. So
Yeah, definitely agree with those. And I'll also add that sometimes if I don't have motivation, or if I'm not excited about what's coming next, maybe that's a sign that that's not the right thing in the book, like that needs to be revised. Like if I'm not excited about a certain chapter, I'm like, this chapter is just going to be a slog. Yeah, maybe it means I need to go back to my outline and figure out something, figure out something new.
Yeah, I heard about the micro goals thing recently, Lori, too, and I've been telling a lot of people about it. And so I guess the thing is to set your goal like just so extraordinarily low that it's pretty much very difficult not to hit it. But the thing is, like, once you sit down, even if your goal is like 10 words, once you sit down, like starting is the hardest part sometimes. And so you're already sitting there in front of your manuscript and you're probably going to write more than 10, and then the other thing, I lose motivation a lot, like in the middle of the book, and I don't reread it all. I don't like go back and edit, but sometimes going back and rereading like the start of the book helps me get excited about it again. All right, we have a question from Danny that I think we've already all answered pretty well, but I'm gonna put up here just in case you guys have anything to add. Do you ask a potential mentee questions like the survey Rachel mentioned, or do you go off of just the submission materials when picking a mentee? I feel like everybody answered that, right? Yeah, okay. Ray asks, if we don't have specific book comps for our query that fit, can we use other mediums like movies, video games with narrative quality, or should we just leave them out?
I think movies and TV shows make great comps. They're so popular, and I think like it immediately shows like how your book probably has a more commercial voice, especially if you're comping it to something it's like a popular Netflix show or something like that. Yeah, I would definitely take comps for movies and shows.
I agree with that. And I also feel like the earlier question about a classic, like I really like it if you can comp movie or a TV show or video game with a book that's in your current area, because then you see both that commercial aspect and how it could fit in the market of your category. So I'm fine with those.
I did see a comp the other day it said that it would appeal to fans of a 90s rom-com movie, and she was pitching a young adult book. And I felt like that wasn't the right way to phrase that, because the fans of that movie are now like 40. Which, I mean, it's fine to also appeal to that market, but that's not your core market in young adult. But to say it's like a young adult version of that movie, that would be a different way to phrase it that would work. Okay.
I think that's interesting too in light of the classics question, because I think if you're pitching a classic, and I just thought about this now, after I said I love classics, I think like you have to be, if you're using a classic, it has to be something that's so well known that you're sure that your mentors will have heard of it. Because if you're pitching a book that was moderately popular in like the 80s or the 90s, like there's a good chance like your audience will have no idea what it is. So I think like if you're not using something that's contemporary, you have to make sure that it's so popular that almost everyone will know about it.
Yeah, I think if you're using TV movies, that's definitely key. Like I've even seen on PitMad comps to movies in TV. I think particularly movies, because TV, there's just so much these days, and so much that gets really popular on streaming. But yeah, like if you're referencing a tiny 80s movie that is not really like part of the pop culture vernacular still, that might not be the way to go.
All right, we have a fun question from Stephanie. What book are you currently reading for fun?
Oh, I'm reading, I really love Tessa Dare's historical romances, and I'm behind on her newest series, but it's Girl Meets Duke is the series, and the second book in that series is The Governess Game, and it's third one just came out. I'm only on the second one, but it's really fun so far. And if you like romance, her books are just fantastic.
I just finished Blackfish City, which is kind of like a near future dystopian book where one of the characters has a killer whale that she travels with, which I thought was pretty awesome. And I am just starting The Queens of Innisleer by Tessa Gratton.
I'm reading The Hazelwood right now, which is not super recent, but I just picked it up, so I'm enjoying that a lot.
I am in the middle of Red, White, and Royal Blue, which is just an utter delight of a book. And I also just finished Anna Bright's The Beholder, which was fantastic.
Did everyone go? I just finished Rob Hart, who's a Pitchwars mentor this year, The Warehouse. I got it on audiobook from the publisher, and it's read by one of my favorite narrators in the entire world, Emily Wu Zellerman.
Oh, she's so good.
Yeah, she's amazing. And then I also started reading on audiobook as well, The Bride Test by Helen Hung, and her books are just, they're so good. So I'm not reading any young adult right now, apparently, but I love Helen's books. I don't know, she makes my heart hurt though. Okay, let's see. Leah asks, oh, by the way, Olivia, I see you, so you're here. What is your definition of a polished manuscript? What steps should a writer take before submitting to Pitchwars?
To me, polished is like nothing is keeping you up at night. Like you can set it aside for a day or two and there's nothing like banging on the inside of your head, begging to be revised. Like you're not still getting ideas. It should be something that you've probably gone through it, like a read through, and you haven't come across anything wrong with it. And for most people, maybe it's something that you've shared with a critique partner or a beta reader, and maybe you've incorporated some of their feedback. I know, and I'm sure some people have gotten into pitch wars on a first draft that has not been read by anyone else. I think that is probably not the norm. So I think, revised to the best of your ability is usually what we talk about when we say polished. So I think actually one other quick thing, I know sometimes people also enter where they feel like there is something wrong with the book, or there is a reason they've been querying and agents aren't connecting, but they just don't know what that is. And that's obviously totally okay. And hopefully that's something we could help with.
Nobody else? Okay. Sarah asks, I think this is going to be a quick answer. Do we have to compare our manuscript to other works in our query? Sometimes I think book comps just don't fit my manuscript, so I don't want to try to fit it into something it actually isn't. I think we might have actually already answered that. Yeah, so you don't have to have comps is the answer if you can't find anything that fits. Great comps will help a query, but like they're not necessary by any means. All right, Belinda asks, are you okay accepting a manuscript with non-American English? Would you recommend changing to American English before pitching to American agents? We actually got this question on a chat already that was about Australian and British English spellings. Do y'all have any input?
I mean, for me personally, I would be fine with it being another English spelling. So I lived in the UK for 15 years of my life. And my own personal manuscripts kind of flit back and forth, much to the irritation of my agent. But I think I think any standard of English would be fine for me. I think most agents, it's not something that they really fixate over. And I think most publishers, if it gets picked up, will have a house style anyway that they'll edit it to fit towards. So I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah. Okay. I knew it would be an easy answer, but I feel like I said the other night in the chat that I feel confident in our mentor selection process, that we have chosen mentors who understand that your spellings are, British or Australian or whatever. Okay, one more question. What do you wish you could tell your younger self when you first started writing to better prepare you?
I think for me that it is a marathon, not a sprint. When I first started taking writing seriously, it was like, okay, in 1 year from now, I'm gonna have a book deal. And spoiler alert, that was not the case. It takes how long it takes. Our journeys are all different, but I think looking at it as something that is a years long journey has been true for me and for I think most authors I know. And so I think it takes what it takes, and just write because you love writing, and know that everyone's journey is different, and then that's okay.
Yeah, I would also kind of piggybacking off of that to set, we talked about micro goals earlier, but setting goals that are within your control. So, if you say something like, my goal is to get an agent this year, that is totally outside your control. If your goal is to finish a book this year, that is 100% something you can do. So really kind of reframing your it's awesome to have those long-term publishing goals, but I think alongside that, good to maybe have those sort of personal achievement type goals that are completely within reach.
I remember someone saying once that something like, I want to become a New York Times bestseller isn't a goal, it's a wish, because it's not something that you can make happen no matter how hard you work. So yeah, definitely, I think your goal should be something that you have control over.
I like that framing of it a lot. You have your wishes and your goals.
Shannon asks, for those that may have the rare case of mentors going to war over them, is there advice for mentees on how to handle these situations? So I will say this happens maybe 3 times a year, I feel like. So it's not a super common occurrence, but we seem to have lost Lori. I think she's having a thunderstorm right now, so she may have lost power or internet. But especially the roles, do either of you have a comment on this?
I think I would really just try and get a sense for if one mentor's vision for my story aligned better with my vision for it. I think it's important to be working with someone who gets your book and gets what you're trying to do with it. So I would try and figure out if one of them seemed to maybe get my book more than the other, or my vision for it anyway.
Okay. Someone's joining. Oh, it's Liz. Okay. So I think we might have lost Lori for good. All right. I'm looking at I feel like I think we've hit all the questions. We've been answering them pretty quickly today. So Lee was sending me some great questions yesterday, but now, of course, when we're live, I can't remember any of them. Oh, there's one. No, I got a spam comment, by the way. And if you post sexually explicit comments in the comments, I will report and delete your comment, just a FYI. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so let me ask y'all a question then, since we have no more questions waiting for us. What are some of your tips for creating a really enticing query letter?
I do a lot of work on queries, and my friends make fun of me because I love queries and I write them for fun when I'm starting a new project. And I think the number one thing is you have to establish at the beginning what your main character, like who they are, but also what they want. There are a lot of queries that I see that don't show the main character being active. And if we don't see them wanting something at the beginning, and I really feel like all stories kind of are birthed from that key desire from that protagonist. And if we don't see that in the query, then it kind of falls apart for me. So getting that across in the first paragraph, I think, is really key.
I think for me, I have to have, sorry.
No, go ahead.
For me, I need to have a really clear idea of what the stakes are. So not only just about the character, but reading the query letter, I need to have a reason to understand what the character is going for, and also have some conception of what the conflict will be. Because from the query letters I have read, sometimes they read more as an introduction to the story, rather than kind of clearly highlighting what it is that will be the main challenge that the character will face.
That's what I was going to say. So yeah, I think knowing what the character wants and knowing what's at stake and getting a sense of the conflict of the story.
Yeah, I actually summarize it for my clients like this. So you need to know who the character is, what they want, and what stands in their way. Or sorry, wait, let me repeat. So who they are and what they want. No. Wait, okay, I feel like I promise I'm good at this. I'm teaching a query class this fall. That they need to know who they are, what stands in their way of getting what they want, and why it matters. So that who, what, and why is what I do. I think I got it that time, right?
Sorry, I got ambushed by my cat. Yeah, that's what I always say is, who is your character? Who's your main character? Which is weird how many queries you see that actually don't even answer that question. But who's your main character? What do they want? What stands in their way of getting what they want? And what happens if they don't get what they want? I just taught a query workshop 3 hours ago. So that's fresh in my mind. Okay, we have probably time for one more question. And Molly asks, what's a young adult trope that you think is a little overdone? I love tropes, but I'm a romance writer, so.
I almost want to say nothing, because I'm always open to seeing new twists on old tropes, particularly if you are take this trope and make it queer, like that automatically makes it way more interesting. I will say the one thing that is just not for me is good girl, bad boy stuff, because I feel like that can be really abusive and it's just been done so much. That is maybe, and I don't even see it being done that a ton anymore. But other than that, I'm always open to anything.
Yeah, I sort of feel the same way. Like, I don't think that there's any particular trope that I would say that like I would be against seeing. It's more like there are a lot of tropes that I don't want to see executed in the same way that I've seen them be executed 1,000 times. As long as it's something that still feels fresh, I would want to see it.
Okay, we just have a couple minutes left. Susan was there, but she is not waiting in the wings anymore, so I'm not sure where she went. But Cal said, great session. I just want to let y'all see that. And I'm going to have y'all tell us where we can find you online, and also let us know if you have anything upcoming that you want to tell us about, like a book coming out or a giveaway or anything like that. Rachel Solomon.
So I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Arlen_Solomon. And my next book is next summer, so not for a little while. But aside from that, I'm teaching a query class in Seattle this fall. So if you're in Seattle, you can check that out at Hugo House.
Julia?
You can find me on Twitter at Jules_Chronicle or on Instagram at Julia Ember YA. My next book is also not coming out until late next year, but if you want to, you can add it on Goodreads. It's called Rune Song.
I am on Twitter and on Instagram at Times New Rachel, same handle at both. And also, I do run a revision-focused blog that several people here have contributed to. If you need help for revision, and it's called BeYourOwnMentor.com.
All right, and since Lori isn't here, you can find her on Twitter at Lori Dennison. Her website is ladennison.com, and her editing website is editorgarden.com. So I want to thank y'all, Rachel and Julia, for joining us. I'm going to put up the schedule of the upcoming workshops while we switch everyone over. It's just going to take me 1 second, because when I lost power earlier, it disconnected from everything. And there we go. All right, hello everybody. I am again going to have the mentors introduce themselves individually. So we're going to start with Olivia, and then Susan, you'll be next, and then Liz, you will be after Susan.
Okay, hi, I'm Olivia Heinbaugh, and I will pronounce that again. It's Heinbaugh. I'm going to be a YA mentor, which I guess everybody here is. And this is my first time mentoring. I was in Pitchwars as a mentee in 2016, and it was an awesome experience. I'm really excited to pay it forward. Oh, she, her pronouns. And I think that's it.
Cool. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Susan Lee. I was a mentee this last round, 2018, for my mentor was Gloria Tao, and had a most amazing time. So now I'm going to be co-mentoring with Ariane DeSambre. This year we're mentoring YA, and I am super excited.
Hi, I'm Liz Lawson, and this is Jeff Bishop again. Whoever was here on Friday, you already met him. We are co-mentoring YA. I am a debut author with my first book coming out in 2020, and it's actually right here if anyone is curious. It's called The Lucky Ones, and we're really excited to be here.
It's gonna be great.
All right. Okay. So when I watched the first chat, I realized I was like mumbling a lot. So I watched these YouTube videos about how to mumble less, and they were all talking about yawning. So now every time I think about mumbling, I start yawning. So if I start yawning, it's not y'all, it's me. It's this association I have in my head now. All right, so we'll just jump right in and start taking some questions. We have a question from Stephanie. Do you have any suggestions for first timers?
I can take that since last year I was a first timer. So you'll hear this a lot and you'll see it all over Twitter, but my first suggestion is do not self-reject. So literally, I think I tried to talk myself out of it multiple times in the application process, but really the day before announcements were being made, I almost pulled out because I was too afraid of publicly not getting chosen. And my friend and I were sitting outside of a bench of a pizza parlor, and she talked me into not self-rejecting. So my very first piece of advice is give it a try. There's nothing to lose by trying. And my second piece of advice is to get as involved as possible, both on the hashtag and on the forums, because you'll hear this again, time and again, but Pitchwars is about the community. So irregardless of what happens when you apply, you're going to end up with a finished manuscript and hopefully a community of writers that you can keep with you as you go along in your journey.
I was just going to add, I think those are awesome points. But just be ready to learn something. It might not be the thing you really want to learn. Like obviously everybody wants to get mentored and, steered on their path. But even if you, get rejections and somebody gives you feedback on your query or feedback on your pages, just be ready to learn something. But also you don't have to take everybody's suggestions.
Yeah, I think that's very true. To keep in mind that you don't have to take everyone's suggestions. Like anything, like any creative endeavor, writing is, very subjective. So, sticking by your guns. And if you feel like a suggestion isn't, doing a certain good service to your manuscript, trusting your gut is important, I think.
All right, I'm so distracted. My cat just crawled into my fruit bowl and laid down. I just tweeted a picture of it if you want to see it, but she's ridiculous.
My dog just snuck into the room too, so that's why I keep looking over my shoulder. So.
I'm trying not to have 3 children sneak into my room. So.
Limar is our Pitchwars social media director. So if you see Pitchwars tweeting, that's usually Lee. Lee says, how many books did you write before getting an agent and or published?
I can answer this one. So my debut came out earlier this year, which I very subtly have my poster. That was the 5th YA book that I finished writing. The book that got me into Pitchwars was my 4th YA book. It's kind of like a convoluted answer, but I signed with an agent for my 2nd book that I ever wrote. And that didn't work out. And I signed with another agent for my 3rd book that I ever wrote, which didn't work out. She also did not like the 4th book at all, the one that was my Pitchwars book in 2016. So that kind of gave it new life. But ultimately, it was the 5th book. So it took a while.
I wrote a women's fiction, I don't like that term, an adult fiction book for all adults. And I shelved it. I never saw the light of day, but it was a completed manuscript. And then I wrote a YA that I did query. Nothing happened with it, unfortunately. I got some R&Rs, revise and resubmits, but Nothing came of it. And then I wrote The Lucky Ones, which is my debut. So this is my third.
Mine was also the third. I wrote, I don't even know what it was, actually. I don't even know what category it would fall in. And then that was a disaster. And then I wrote a young adult, and then I wrote a romance novelette, and that got picked up by a small press. But it was actually my fourth book that got my agent and got a publishing deal, which was young adult. Okay, Kelsey. I'm so distracted. I'm so sorry. She's just glaring at me. Kelsey asks, aside from having a complete proofread manuscript, what do you recommend potential mentees do to prepare for the submission window?
I think also having a synopsis ready to go is a really great thing. Like the last thing you want is for one of the mentors to request and say, by the way, I want to see a synopsis, and you don't have one because
we require synopsis now.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Make the synopsis really good. I don't know what else you need to prepare. Maybe have in mind also what your ideal mentor-mentee relationship would look like. I mean, I know everybody would like it if mentors were fighting over them, but like in the off chance that it happens, like you want to have an idea of how involved you want somebody to be in your book.
Oh, I'll take that. Yeah. Well, it's similar to a point I tried to make on Friday that I think I bungled. I would say like you have 10 pages, is it right? Is that how much you send, or is it the first chapter? Like, I can't. Can you hear? Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. My like sort of out of left field advice is to like front load it. Like you have 10 pages to impress us, and then like you've got like if they request the full manuscript, like they'll see the book later on. But it's like you gotta. I would say like do as much as you can within that frame. So like at least that was my strategy. I like might have what was 3 chapters I turned into one super long chapter, and like it was longer than the rest of the book. Like just like get as much good stuff as you can up front is my general advice to people that are like getting ready to go, because like you can always move it later, yeah, that's what I got. And everyone's like, no, don't do that at all.
I think that's really good advice, but then I think you just keep doing that through your whole manuscript, and then your manuscript's better.
I mean, that's true. Just like write the best book ever, and then you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Make it all important and special.
All right. Anybody else want to jump in on that before we go to the next question? Okay. I love how Jeff is just like kind of there.
He's sort of in the background where he belongs.
Okay, Jennifer asks, are you planners or pantsers when writing your own books?
I am starting to, I'm working on my second book right now, my fourth, but my second that we're submitting to my editor. And so this is a question I've been thinking about a lot. I am very much a pantser. Plotting, I find boring, and also I feel like super caged in when I plot. But I've been forced to write a synopsis for this book, and it actually is helpful. So while I am a pantser, I'm jealous of plotters.
You're a pantser in rehab. You're recovering.
Yes, that's a good point. I'm trying to be better at plotting, but yeah, solidly pantser over here.
I am also team pantser, which kind of sucks because sometimes I get halfway through and I have no idea what happens next. And but then I step away and try to figure that out. Although I'm writing a new manuscript now, and I'm following Gwen Hayes' Romancing the Beat. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It's great for romance books, but it's all the beats that you hit in romance. And so though I'm still pantsing, I'm actually writing each of the beats as I go, and I'm finding it quite interesting, the process. So yeah, maybe I'm a pantser in rehab too.
For me, it very much depends on what I'm working on. I don't like to have a super detailed synopsis because, yeah, I think the magic happens like when it's unexpected. But depending on the project, yeah, I had the same experience where I was preparing a synopsis to submit, and like that was kind of strange to have it all spelled out and have all that stuff figured out. But I don't hate it. Like I kind of like knowing where I'm going and the magic stuff still happens. So I think I also might be turning more into a plotter. The very first book that manuscript that I wrote that, you know, didn't get me an agent or whatever had 4 points of view, which like, I think I know why maybe it didn't get me an agent, but that was when I wrote that, I felt like I had to plot it like at least a certain amount ahead of where I was writing on any given day. And I actually really liked that. But the second and third books, just, I totally pants those. And I like it.
Yeah, well, mine totally depends. So like if I'm writing romance, even adult romance or young adult romance, I use the Save the Cat beat sheet. But if I'm writing pretty much anything else, I'm a pantser. But I do use the Save the Cat beat sheet after I write the first draft to check my pacing. All right. So
Can I just say another thing? I just put it in our little chat, but there's actually like an online course. It's Save the Cat. And I had like tried not to get into Save the Cat because so many people love it. And I don't know, maybe I just wanted to be cool. But the course has really been helpful, especially when I am working on the thing I'm working on. So it's by the author who does Save the Cat, the novel. I would recommend it. It's a really good course.
So it's at this website, udemy.com. Susan, looks like Susan's taking pictures of animals too. That's awesome.
And I have to say, I'm also really lucky that everybody at my publisher talks a lot, and a bunch of us have been taking the course and being like, why didn't we take this course before? So it's been fun to take it with other people.
Okay, we have a question. Thoughts on love triangles?
Pro.
I mean, I think we're pro. Love triangles are always fascinating, and if done well, can really like make your book exciting. I think. I know that after Twilight and Hunger Games and everything, they got a little bit worn, but I do think that like there's definitely space for them, especially if they're done in a unique and new way.
So I read a lot of adult romance, and when I read, I actually do not prefer love triangles. But when I write them a lot because actually it's kind of a really great way to add conflict into your story. So if you want an easy kind of crutch for conflict, the love triangle is a great way to go.
I'm not really for or against. I will say that if I'm on like team whatever and they don't end up together though, that like will bug me for a really long time. And so even though I don't mind watching and reading things with love triangles, like there is that aspect of like, oh God, I can't watch. Like if I'm going to read romance, I like to know who's going to end up happy at the end. But I agree though that the tension in it is always awesome.
Yeah, and that's hard because if they're like done well, you are rooting, you understand the desire for both of them. And so you always end up on one team, and then being disappointed is hard for sure.
Boy, the bad boy better win if you're submitting this. I'm kidding. Don't do whatever you want.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So I think what Liz said though is really important is that it has to be done well, because I've read some love triangles where it's like there's clearly a great choice and clearly a bad choice, and there's no tension there for me. It's just frustrating at that point.
Yeah, it's like Bridget Jones' Diary, where you're like, obviously you should not end up with one of them because he's a huge jerk. So yeah.
All right, Susan, we tend on these young adult shows to get a lot of questions about like what's okay in young adult in terms of content. So this is a specific thing, but if you could also answer kind of in a more general sense as well. I've got a manuscript that started out as new adult, but I've gotten suggestions to turn it into a YA. If I did, there'd be a lot of underage drinking in it. Is that looked down upon?
All right, so I'm going to take this for the reason that I wrote a book that's all about sex and there's sex on the page. So I kind of felt like I had to grapple with things that some parents of teenagers might not be like super cool with. What I think about underage drinking is that you can totally write a book about that. That's very relevant to year-olds. I don't know if you guys have read The Art of Losing by Lizzie Mason, but she handles alcohol and the, you know, how that reverberates through the characters' lives, and it's done really, really well. So I say yes, but I don't think something that would be like The Hangover for young adults would be the best place for, here are the hijinks we got up to when we were drunk. It was great. And I think you have to be careful not to have like an issue cautionary tale book, but if it's like realistic and you unpack some of the things about drinking and how it affects the characters' lives, I totally think that you could.
Yeah, I mean, my debut actually, like one of the major plot points kind of revolves around drinking that had happened in the past. And I mean, that's the thing, like realistically, most teenagers do drink. And so I think that I'm a fan of YA, contemporary particularly, that really does mirror real life in a positive, not a positive way, but in a way that that teens can like see themselves in, I guess. So, you know, I don't think we're definitely not opposed to it. And I don't think most agents are. I mean, I do agree with Olivia that like if you had maybe a hangover style book, it would be more difficult probably. But again, like I do think that editors in the YA space are pretty aware that like they're writing, you know, their audience is supposed to be for teens and not necessarily, we're not supposed to be writing for their parents, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I know there's been a lot of conversation about that recently too. And, you know, I'm in favor of like YA being for teens.
Yeah. I think if someone's curious about drinking, like hand them a book where characters drink and there's real, like maybe it is fun, but maybe there's, you know, problems that happen. And you know, better than getting drunk.
I mean, I just like, I think like, yeah, I would say, I don't know that there are many agents that are going to tell you not to do it with, there are probably some, but not to drink, but I feel like the drinking thing, people have kind of moved past because like kids are drinking, like there's other, and they're probably doing other stuff too. And like, that's, I guess the next level of like, what are we going to be allowed to like be honest about, you know, like go watch Euphoria, which is like the like 10 levels above like what I, you know, would expect. But it's just like, yeah, like the drinking, when people say like, what about drinking? I'm like, that feels pretty like run of the mill now. And it's like, now we're trying to be honest in literature about like what kids are doing with other stuff that, you know, still seems to be sort of like a block. I don't know how everyone else feels about that, but like, I don't know, the drinking thing always, I'm just kind of like, yeah, like they're doing it. Let's just like talk about the next level up. That's like, you know,
yeah.
Kids are doing now.
I mean, I do think that there are a lot of YA books that have drinking mentioned in them. It's not necessarily like a huge part of it. And that's probably, I agree with Olivia again, where if it's going to be like a giant plot point in your book, it needs to be handled like delicately and maybe shown from both perspectives in terms of it being, you know, problematic possibly. So
I'm actually really curious.
Oh, sorry. As you say, not to open a big can of worms, but it also just depends on the age of your characters. So YA is very broad right now, and we don't really have a lot. I mean, the conversation is what is lower YA and upper YA. So a lot of times people think YA is your 17 and 18-year-olds, but it can also include your 15 and 16-year-olds. So just be aware of who your audience is and also the age of your characters.
I was going to add, not that every like librarian or teacher is like this, but one of my side gigs is writing book lists. And I remember I was asking for help from a librarian for a list, and she kept telling me that different YA books were like clean, which I was like, does she mean like, but that was like a big selling point for her. And so I realized when I was putting out my book, like my book is not clean and therefore will not be recommended by people who think that that's the important aspect in YA. But yeah, still, I hope people would rather learn from a book than somewhere else, which I wanted to ask about. You mentioned Euphoria, and not to go off on a tangent, but I was like, I watched that show and I was like, wow, I'm out of my depth. And I don't think that's like normal everyday stuff, but like, yeah, that show made me think.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that everyone has different experiences too. Like I remember when I was in middle school, I had classmates who would drink recreationally. But I never, I mean, I grew up with a military father, so like I was terrified, but I never touched alcohol, until I was much, much older. Um, but those books are out there where there is no content that anyone might object to, and it is what school librarians and librarians tend to gravitate to, and a lot of them actually they can't have certain things in them in order to put them on their list. So that's something to consider when you're writing as well, is if you want to be on those school library lists, then you're not going to be able to have some of the content that other people might. That's still publishable, but not necessarily for those lists.
I had one. My pitchwars mentor, actually, the note that she gave me was that the librarians would object to parents knowing about it, which I had in my book. So I took that out to just keep that in mind, I guess, that like don't have it just be like a accepted thing, even if that also might be like a real life. But like that's fine. Apparently that's another like level of
That's interesting.
the rules that just exist for this. So.
All right, Vanessa asks, what about if the submission has excellent writing, but the query needs work?
I mean, in my opinion, queries are a different kind of writing than writing a manuscript. It's more of like a science-y kind of, if you want to put it that way. There's more of a format to it. It's very, very hard. I found my queries to be harder to write than my entire book, because, shortening it is hard. So I think if the query needs work, that's something that can be worked on for sure. And if the submission is excellent and the voice is there, then that's the most important thing.
So since I've queried books unsuccessfully and successfully, I realized the problem with the books that I queried and that didn't get a lot of requests, there were problems with the book, and that made it a lot harder to write the query. So I'm not saying if you have trouble writing the query, your book's not good. Like that's not it. But if you're able to distill your book in like these elements in a way that's kind of like easy to lay out, then you're probably doing a couple things right. And I mean, I also think just like try if you can, even though you only have those few paragraphs, if your character has an awesome voice and your character has an awesome voice, like try to just put a little bit of that in the query, and that will make people intrigued to read your writing.
I would highly suggest trying to take advantage of some of the critiques that are being offered out there for your query, because despite the fact that if your writing's great, you would hope that that would stand on its own. A lot of times your submission pages won't get read if your query isn't strong. So I think with, especially when you get to querying itself with agents, they'll only read your query before even going into your pages. And this is my first time mentoring, but depending on the number of submissions and time, sometimes your query will be the only thing. And it's the first thing that we're going to see. So I think, yes, it hopefully your pages will be amazing and someone will get their eyes on it, but don't take that risk. Really try to make your query as strong as possible. I think what Olivia said is spot on, is if you can get a little bit of the voice of the book in that query, that'd be great. But if you're worried, I would just take advantage of a lot of those. I'm seeing a lot of offers for query critiques from former mentors and mentees out there, and that might be helpful in swapping queries with some of your writing community if you can. I would really suggest trying to get that nailed down.
I would say also specifically, especially if you have critique partners, find people who have not read your book to read your query. Because I think a lot of times if I read one and I have questions or I'm really confused about something, if I haven't read the book, then I know the query is not it's just like not standing as it is. So you get enough eyeballs. You don't have to take everything that everybody says, but if you get a consensus that like something is confusing or they don't know why this is interesting or why you put it in the query, then that can inform you pretty well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Susan, because I feel sometimes when we receive this question, I feel like they might be looking for an excuse to just not work on their query, which is definitely not what you should be counting on. But when I was reading, like as long as I saw something in the concept that I was interested in, I would read it. Like sometimes you would just get a concept that you know right off the bat you're not interested in reading. Like for me, gender-based magic. I'm not a mentor this year, so I can say what I don't want. But like gender-based magic is like a big no-no for me if you don't account for non-binary people. So I know right off the bat that I'm not going to be interested in those stories. But otherwise, I would usually read it. But I do feel like agents and editors at publishing houses that take unsolicited queries, they are not quite so lenient about it.
Yeah, that's very true and a good point. And also, I think in a quick query tip, like the thing that really helped me the second time around when I was querying was, and I know you read this all over the place, but it's really true that like finding the hook of your book is the most important thing for your query. And if you can find that, then you have a hook, which is important. And the query is going to be a lot easier to write. So just a little tip there.
That's why I like Twitter pitching. Like it's not the best place to pitch every book, but if you can pitch it in a tweet, like you probably have a hook. And I'm not at all bitter that I haven't Twitter pitched anything since the character limit went up, but I'm a little bitter. I did it. You also have to do it in 140.
I mentioned that the other day. I was like, in my day, we had to Twitter pitch in 140 characters.
You did not put spaces between your sentences. I certainly didn't.
I thought one thing that I would add about pitchwars specifically is just to realize that not all books pitch real well, like in smaller amounts, and some don't even pitch well in queries. So it's like, for instance, at the end of pitchwars is a showcase, and some books don't pitch as strongly in a small snippet as others do, and so that's why it's important for you to try to take advantage of any place that you can really sell the story. So whether it's the query, whether it's putting a little bit of effort into the synopsis, whether it's Twitter pitch parties or the showcase, just know that it's not going to be a slam dunk for every book. And there are like quieter books or some books that are just a little bit more complicated that the fewer words are a little bit more difficult to sell that book, and that's okay. So just realize that you're going to have lots of different opportunities, and make each of those opportunities to distill your book down into the word count. Take advantage of those as best you can.
Yeah, definitely agree. For my book, I did a Twitter pitch party for it and got nothing, like literally nothing. And then when I actually queried, I got like a 50% request rate. So it's just, sometimes your book is better in one thing than another. And it just, the appeal, and also sometimes you're just better at one thing or another. I was never good at Twitter pitching. So that's the other thing.
Okay. Stephanie said, thank you for the great advice. Cats are the best. The second part is why that tweet or that comment got shown on screen today.
I know we don't have wish lists yet, but Stephanie, I don't know if you should be. I'm kidding. Dogs are the best, but it's cool. It's fine. No wish list. We're fine.
People
In
are
all my bios talk about my one-eyed cat, and we lost her this year. So cats are the best. I'm really missing her. I'm keeping her in my bio.
People are sending me pictures of their cats on Twitter now.
I appreciate that.
I like both. Okay. What do you look for in a mentee? And I feel like we can skip the obvious, like great book that I think I can help. Anything additional,
Is anybody here mentored before aside from you, Sarah? That's what I'm kind of curious about.
Oh, that's a good question. No,
I mentored for Author Mentor Match. So this year.
I'll start. I'm going to take it from the approach of having just done Pitch Wars and having had a really great community of fellow mentees. And we all went through many different emotions, and we're all at different places now too. So I think what I'm looking for in a mentee is someone who's willing to put in the work. And I know that's hard because life happens. And for those of you who are new to Pitch Wars, we're actually very lucky because the timeline is a little less truncated than it's been in the past, but it's still over the holidays and it's a lot of work. So be willing to put in the work. I also want someone who wants to have honest communication. A lot of the mentees were afraid to talk to their mentors. They're afraid to let them know how they were doing, or if they were stressed out, or if they didn't agree with some of the edits and recommendations. So for me, I think it's really important that we have an honest dialogue and open dialogue. And also, I want someone who wants to do this, definitely focused on a career, but also wants to have some fun. So Ariane and I are kind of goofy. We want to enjoy this process with you. So despite all this, I want this to be a good time. And I'm hoping that our mentees or the people that submit to us are looking for kind of a little bit on the goofy side and are willing to give it a try and have some fun.
I agree with what Ola you're saying. I kind of hope that, that like our personality would work out together and we'd have fun. But I think like for me, it's I want to get excited about somebody else's book, and not that it's my book, but I love that feeling of collaborating and how like with working with somebody else, you might come up with an idea you never would have if you weren't working with that person. So I really value that. I feel like I was a mentee in 2016, and like just little thing, like we changed my title, and I hate coming up with titles, and it was so nice to have a mentor who would help me come up with titles. And also my mentor did a lot of helping me in the query stage of things. Like when it was all over and I was making my query list, and I was kind of, this was my third time out there querying. I'd already like had 2 agents not work out. So, I mean, I needed some pep talks, and she gave me pep talks, and she told me the agents that she had good, communication with, even if they weren't her agent. And that kind of information is like priceless, and you really only have if you've been querying a lot and if you've talked with a lot of agents. And I was really at that point, I was so grateful for that I'm like excited to impart that particular wisdom. So I'm really looking for a mentee who would like to hear the wisdom I have.
Forgot how to unmute it for a second. I would say somebody who's willing to do the work for sure. That's really important. Revising is not always fun, but it's a really important part of the process. And honestly, Pitch Wars is not the last time you're going to be revising your book. So it's something that you're just going to have to get used to, and also hopefully enjoy. I personally really enjoy revising. I think it's a really fun part of the process. So somebody who can really embrace that and also have fun. I think it's important to have a good rapport with the person. The person I mentored for Author Mentor Match is wonderful. I talk to her all the time. And having like an open dialogue with them. I would definitely, Suzanne said that some of the mentees were like nervous about talking to their mentors and stuff. I would hope that our mentee would never feel nervous. Like I think we're pretty easygoing and like open to all questions. I don't think any question is stupid. I think every question is valid and like worthy for sure. And somebody who's really excited. That's like hugely important.
I just want to have one thing, and it's slightly controversial. So you guys can like redact if you want to. This is live. But also I've seen questions in these chats about should the mentees have like a Twitter presence or online presence? And I don't think necessarily that's important, but I do think for me, I want a mentee who wants a writing community, because this is an impossible job to do alone. I mean, you're going to hear it from everybody. And I know for some people, you may be introverted or shy or whatever, but writing is very, very difficult. And publishing, the road to publishing is super difficult without a support system. So whether you're bringing a support system in with you into Pitch Wars, or you're looking for a support system in Pitch Wars, or you just didn't even know you needed one, but want one, I hope mentees that are looking for to build their support network, because number one, and this is like, I just, as a mentor, can't be your only supporter, so I'm on submission myself, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And so I want to help you with this manuscript, but I know that, it's like once you build that rapport, it's easy to just rely on that one person. And I also want someone who's going to take advantage of every opportunity that's put in front of them. And that's part of what Pitch Wars is. And whether you find all your CPs for life here or not, I do think it's important for mentees and, potential mentees to be open to the writing community, because I just don't think you can do this on your own.
All right. For all of those of you watching for cat updates, she started playing with the onion like a toy. So, Jeff, is your shirt Space Jam? Okay, sorry.
Before we run out of time, I just wanted to show you. That's not a dog. Sorry, Rachel. Rachel's looking for my dog. But because I don't have a book cover yet, I do want to just show you my Chris Evans pillow, because this is like probably just as good. And this came from my Pitch Wars community. Made me my Chris Evans pillow. So this will have to do until my book sells.
Oh, that is great.
I didn't want to run out of time.
It was just like, we have 23 minutes left, but before we run out of time. All right. Megan asks, what are some of the struggles that you think mentees might face during the mentoring process? And do you have any advice for potential mentees on how to prepare for those? Jeff perked up.
I was going to say something really quickly, though, which is that when I did Pitch Wars, I had a baby right in the middle of it. So not to be like, try not to have a baby in the middle of Pitch Wars, because, if you're already on that road, it's going to happen. I think it's like just so easy to procrastinate, but my thing is just like, really don't. Like, you're going to feel so much better submitting to Pitch Wars if you've sat on your query for a couple of days, and you're going to feel way better about revisions if like you can put them away for a couple of minutes and then like bring them back out and read it. If I had other thoughts, I forgot what they were. So go on.
I think I perked up because I wanted to add an addendum to the last question. So maybe after everyone answers, I'll come in.
I would say questions that you should ask yourself. How do you handle stress? How do you deal with stress? Because it is a highly stressed, there are times where this can be highly stressful. So ask yourself that beforehand so that you're prepared, whether it's your revision deadlines, whether it's preparing for the showcase, whether it's the showcase itself. So just ask yourself how you deal with that so that you can just be aware. And the other thing is to ask yourself and with your mentor how you want to utilize deadlines. So I think sometimes people have a little bit more of a maybe a loose relationship where they're just like, send it to me when you can. And other people work so much better under a deadline. So kind of know your work style as well and be prepared for that before going in as well.
I also think, though, this is a good time, not disagreeing with you, to discover your work style. I never knew how much I loved deadlines until I had a book under contract. And I was like, I can do this in 2 weeks. And then like, it was great because I was like, coffee, snacks, writing, done. Now I'm like drafting and I hate it. I don't have a deadline. But it's also like your time to realize how you revise too, because revising with an edit letter is very different from revising just from reading through it yourself. And I think this is something that I didn't really learn until I had a book contracted. I never had to rewrite something from the ground up, and I would have like balked at that pretty much in any other place along my journey. But once I embraced the like, you will open a new document for this revision and occasionally paste things over, like it opened up a whole new world to me. So it's really hard, but embrace making huge changes because it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, very much agree. I think another thing that everybody kind of touched on is to embrace criticism. And, you know, it always constructive, obviously, like, you know, I think everyone wants this to be like a positive experience, but, you know, hearing, even if it is very positive, hearing stuff about your own work can be really hard. But know that if it's your mentor who's giving you that criticism, it is coming from a place of like support and positivity, and it's only trying to help your book get better, essentially. And, you know, I think there's something to be said for like sticking up for your own creative process and your own creative work, but at the same time, like taking at least into consideration what your mentor is saying. I think that's very important.
And look, Liz criticizes me all the time. And yes, I go home and I cry for like a couple hours every night, but then like, you know, I know what to do better the next time. So it's like, you just gotta, I do have a real point, which is building off the procrastinating. I do have a real point off the procrastinating point. I think that like I was a mentor or mentee in 2017, and I had an amazing mentor. Her name is Alicia Clancy. I love her. And she, by not procrastinating, like, I think I mean, don't like just like rush through things, but if you're continuing to work and you're like, because we're required to do technically one read through, right? Isn't that the rule, or one edit letter?
Yeah, well, one edit, and then you have to read through again to make sure that everything that you wanted to be done was done.
Okay.
Basically.
So Alicia like would turn stuff around in like 24 hours, and she did like 6 for me. But and like it's A, because she's incredible and she's really fast at it, but B, like I just like kept going, and like if you are showing the initiative, I think your mentors will probably be incentivized and like feel like excited to do more than is minimally required, because they'll be like, oh, this person like if you seem super invested, they will like it's infectious, right? Like you like want to help this person even more if they're like taking your advice and like showing you that like I'm working as hard as I can to keep up. And like again, everyone works different, so if you like don't feel bad if it does just take you longer, like that's okay too. I just like, yeah, I think that
showing enthusiasm
and like work ethic.
Yeah,
you know what I mean,
yeah.
I don't know, yeah.
Well, I think most mentors, I would assume, I know, you know, I went through my author mentor matches mentee, her manuscript multiple times, even though like the requirement is much less than that. But I think most mentors want this to be a long-term relationship, you know, like want to help their mentee as far into the future as the need is there.
It might also be a good time to just let it be known that much like I think the rest of our publishing journey is that we're all going to have kind of different steps along the way and different progress. So I think Rachel and Solomon talked about this in the chat earlier about just a little bit of jealousy about your peers and, you know, professional jealousy. And Pitch Wars is not immune to that. People have different relationships with their mentors. They, you know, it's like they communicate differently. Some are buddies, some are super professional, some have multiple readings, some don't. And so just be prepared to set the expectation upfront with your mentor should you be selected, and kind of just focus on what you've got in front of you, but also realize that the jealousy portion starts early. So Rachel always says, let yourself feel it, you know, and then move on. So yeah, I would just put that out there.
I wanted to just real quick go back to like if you get an edit letter and you're not sure if you want to change something or not. I feel like I learned a lot in my first edit letter with my editor, which was I knew a suggestion was good when I was immediately embarrassed that it had been the way it was in the version she read. And like, I wish that wasn't the case. I wish it was just like, all right, yes, we should talk this out. And maybe I was right. And maybe you were right. But every time I was like, oh my God, yeah, why is that like that? I have no idea. And that's how I knew it was a good idea.
Yeah, I have hated every edit letter I've ever received the first time I read it. And I go through this process every time. And even though I'm now aware of it, like I still go through it where I hate it. And I think, I'm like, oh, I don't like, why would they say that? I can't believe they said that, you know? And then I would give it like 2 days and I would read it again and be like, oh, I guess I can see that. I guess they have a point there. And then by the time I'm done with the revision, I'm like, my editor is a genius, you know? And so I feel like everybody, when they get that first edit letter, that your like gut reaction is to kind of like protect yourself from it and defend yourself from it. But if you give it a couple days, like I feel like you're gonna see some of the points. You need some emotional distance from it, I think. All right, we have some questions, so we're going to try to get through them. But if we don't get through all of them by 9 o'clock tonight, make sure you tune in for our upcoming chats. We have upcoming both Twitter and video chats, which I'm going to show the schedule for those at the very end of the video. So make sure you tune in for those if we don't get to your question. And because we have a couple of questions here, I am going to skip over some questions that I feel like we've covered either in this chat or in previous chats quite a bit. So if you have a question, especially about word count, or POVs, how many POVs, or comp titles, make sure you watch all the other chats because we have covered those topics quite a bit in most of the chats. But we have a question here from Sahira that I have not seen before. What do you look for in dialogue? Are there any words or phrases that make it sound awkward for you, not as natural?
So my background is actually in screenwriting and playwriting, so dialogue's kind of the thing. I'm like, it feels stupid, but say it out loud. And if you don't feel like you'd say it, then unless the person's really different from you, they might not either. But my big stumbling block is when people try to be overly flowery in their, like the way that people are talking. And it's like the difference between giving the person who's talking an action, like something that they're doing, versus she said slyly, or, like lots of adverbs and lots of, different ways on how you say it. Like just, you want all that stuff working in concert, and for that not to be distracting. Like when I'm reading dialogue, I want the dialogue tags to just like melt away. I don't want to hear them, so that's what I say about dialogue.
Yeah, Jeff was just reminding me of something I said the other day about dialogue, which is dialogue, when books use dialogue as like a way to dump exposition, and give you like all of this information. I think I saw a tweet about this yesterday, actually, which is what prompted the conversation, where it's like you use the dialogue to give like all of this backstory, and it just doesn't work naturally in a conversation. That is definitely something to watch out for, I think.
I think that's also context between two speakers. Like if the 4 of us, 5 of us were talking, and I was like, so how we're doing pitch wars, which is that contest where it to us, and like you have to know exactly what the characters know, and I think that helps you avoid that.
Agreed.
Yeah, I had an instructor call that "as you know, Bob" conversation.
Yeah.
So as you know, Bob, we are doing pitch wars.
I'd also add, like, especially in YA, slang, because like I'm 25 and already I feel like I've like just lost what high schoolers are saying. So like don't just like parroting like what your kids are saying is probably not a good idea, because it's just gonna read like corny and like because it's just, I mean, and a lot of that stuff does read corny because you can't just like say like versus when you say it live.
Yeah, I think there's like slang that's been around for like a decade, which is like,
well, it's like someone recently said to me like, oh, like don't you say like you're turnt when you go out and like get drunk, and it's like, no, even like that's like when I was a senior in high school, and now like even that I feel like is corny, so like just like avoid it, you know what I mean? Like that's,
and especially with publishing being so slow,
right?
Yeah.
I also think it's so subjective. Like I feel like you look at Goodreads for any book and somebody's gonna be like, oh my gosh, these teenagers talk like idiots, and then somebody else is gonna be like, no teenager talks like that, they sounded so sophisticated. So like a little bit, you're not gonna win, but to just fit the characters and the voice of your story.
Yeah, as long as it fits the character, right? And like the relationship between the characters, and like you said, like as long as you know what your characters know. That's
Like I liked Dawson's Creek, which was on when I was like a middle school.
Did
I mean, the biggest criticism of that was like, oh my gosh, they use such big words and blah, blah, blah. But like, I found that extremely entertaining.
Yeah, agreed.
Great.
Okay, any other comments on dialogue before we get to the next question? This is also a question from Sahara. Sahara, you ask good questions. What makes a character complex to you? Everyone's scared.
Wicker King. Has anybody else read that?
The what?
The Wicker King?
No.
Those characters, they were so hard to figure out at the beginning, but it didn't make me any less compelled to keep reading it. I think a character I'm interested in reading, I don't know everything at the beginning, but I really like that by like the middle to the end, I think I know what I would do if I was them. Like I would know enough about them. Like they have enough substance that, you know, it's like a real person walking around, you know what they would do.
Not to get overly crafty, but I think you can add what makes a character compelling is goal, motivation, and conflict. So as long as you've got their GMC going in each of the scenes, then I still want to know where they're going, why they're going, and what's standing in their way from getting there. And I think irregardless of if I can relate to a character or not, as long as I see if that GMC is pulling me in, then I think that adds that complexity that makes me want to keep reading.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. I don't have a ton to add. Yeah, I think really knowing your characters, like I did a revision before I signed with my agent, actually, a big revision of my debut, and there were a couple character comments of like the secondary characters that she had in terms of like fleshing them out and making them whole, and really like even like mapping out your characters can really help make them more complex, because then you really know them, and the better you know your characters, the better your reader is going to, and the more it's going to show on the page.
Yeah, I would say avoid like I used to read my stepdad's like Jack Reacher novels where it's like a man had like a code and like they like up front you like say one thing about the person and you like that's just like how they make every decision, and it's just like that's not how people work. Where it's like one singular like just like character trait that like then like determine. Yeah, so don't write like Jack Reacher.
Even unless you want to.
I mean, yeah, like look, what do we know?
I think it's also really interesting when the character has conflicting motivations. So if something like an internal motivation is conflicting directly with an external motivation, or if they think they want something and then they get it and realize they don't want that, they want something else. I think that's another way to make a character more complex. Okay. When looking at submissions, what makes a first page stand out to you? Action, voice, hooks, all of the above. And I know most of you haven't been mentors yet, but I think you can guess, right?
We would definitely say voice. That's the thing that always stands out to me first in a book and really draws me in. You know, everything else, I mean, you can work on voice, I think, but like if that's there, that's a huge bonus. That's a huge selling point, I think.
I think it's really hard to pin it down to any one thing. I would agree that it's voice, but I mean, if you do start off with an action and it's like crazy, then that's, you know, that I'll probably keep reading. It's really hard to know where to start your novel. I think that's probably a whole other conversation. But I think having goals and wants and needs for your characters right up front, even if they're not the ones that they're going to be working on through the story, is just like a good solid place to go to get people interested.
I mean, if you're talking about the early pages, I think it's important to establish the voice and the hook, but it doesn't have to be like the entire hook of the whole, you know, book, but it's something that, and this is the same whether it's for pitch wars or when you're querying, you've got to make people want to keep reading. So in those early pages, definitely for me, I think I'm going to be looking for both the voice and the hook.
And I have heard I should say, not heard. I've read a bunch of different things about YA particularly being a genre where people like to see action up front, like rather than a character just like in a literary fiction novel where they're just like thinking about things, or a book where there's like a lot of backstory up front, having that character be like in scene, doing something that tells you something about the character and maybe a little bit about where they're coming from, their backstory, is important, because you want to draw your readers in immediately if possible.
Okay, we're going to do one last question before we sign off for the night. So we have a question from Jennifer. Can you talk about log lines and how these can be used to help build a query? Also, what are your book's log lines?
Okay, so I think log lines are great if you come up with them, and they are terrible if you're having a hard time coming up with them. Like, they are the worst. I know for my book that came out earlier, I never like pitched log lines to my editors. They just came up with one, and now I can't even remember what it is. But it was like, when they said it, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Okay, great. But I don't think they got that for my query. So I don't think it's like necessary. I think the hook in mine was that the person giving sex advice in my book has never been kissed. So like, that's a hook, but that's not what like the whole book's about.
Yeah, I find log lines very, very difficult. So difficult. I feel like the shorter the amount of space I'm allowed to pitch things in, the harder I find it. I would like a 15-page document to be able to pitch, but nobody wants to read that. I just looked at the log line that my publisher wrote for my book, and yeah, it's like, it tells like the very broadest sense of what the book is about, but I guess that's what a log line is, really, if anyone's interested. It says, in the aftermath of a school tragedy, May and Zach struggle with grief, survivor's guilt, and the complex emotional impact of the event, learning how to heal and hope in the face of it all, which is a very broad description of my book, but it works, I guess. I guess painting your manuscript in the broadest terms is what a log line really is.
I just realized that I also have experiences and everything plastered all over the place for my book. And like, that tells you absolutely nothing, right? It's like very catchy. But I think like, wouldn't it be great if when you sat down to write a novel, you came up with a really great log line that also turned into a really great query, which turned into a great synopsis and was like a perfectly made book. Like, I feel like in an ideal world, that's how I would work.
Yes.
I used to think that only high concepts, like really high concept books, could have a log line. So I'd always just use the excuse that my book isn't high concept enough. So I'm just going to use that excuse right now. My book isn't high concept enough to have a log line, but maybe someday I'll figure something out.
Yeah, or some marketer will figure it out for you.
Yes, exactly. And it really won't have anything to do with the book, but good enough. Just sell it. Go sell it.
Yeah, I feel like log lines are far more important in selling screenplays than they are in selling books, and that's usually where you're seeing log lines used as much. For us, I feel like it's nice if you can come up with like a really catchy one, but if you can't, like, nobody really cares that much. For Keeping Her Secret, I can't remember who it was, but they came up. It wasn't a log line so much as just like a tagline, I guess. But it was all's fair in summertime. No, all's fair in love and summertime prank wars. But that's just, I feel like that's more of a tagline than a log line. But that's not my forte.
Maybe I don't know what the difference is between the two of them. I guess I do hear people talk about.
I think.
I think.
Oh, okay.
Tagline is like what you would see on a billboard marketing a movie.
Okay.
Just like kind of a phrase that is nice and sounds good, but like doesn't necessarily mean anything.
So experiences in everything would be
like a tagline, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
Gotta learn something. It's like nice and like cutesy and sounds good, and you can see it on a billboard. But like a log line is really like what you see in a book under like the copyright stuff, where it's like giving you like the facts and it's kind of dry.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, so if you're out there and you write books and you're like, oh, I don't have a log line, don't worry. It's not really necessary in selling books. But if you're writing a screenplay and you don't have a log line, you should probably work on that.
Liz, can we also talk about how amazing your cover is? Show that thing again, girl.
I love
it.
They did such a good job with it. I was, yes.
Why don't we show them again?
Yes.
No, do. I didn't get a big look at it.
Get underlined. There you go.
Here, we can do this.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yes.
Oh,
Zoom in.
thanks, guys.
No, I'm glad you held it that close because I didn't see the guy the first time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, there's some depth there.
there is. It's nice.
All right, so we are out of time. So if y'all could just tell us where we can find you online, and also if you have anything upcoming you want to let us know about, like if you have a book releasing or if you have a giveaway or a book sale or something like that. Olivia?
Okay, so my Twitter and Instagram is at Olive Juice Lots. My website is oliviaheinbaugh.com. You can get my book, The Birds, the Bees, and You and Me. There's an eggplant on it. So I don't really have much coming up. I would say if you could go to any of my profiles and check out the book trailer that my spouse made for this book and the book trailer that my spouse and I made together for my friend's book, that would be like the coolest.
Susan?
Oh, sorry. I am at Susan Lee Writes, both on Twitter and on Instagram. And I'm currently on submission, so I do not have a book. But if I were to have written, if there were books that I wish that I had written, this one, Frankly in Love by David Yoon. Also, Have a Little Faith in Me by Sonia Hardall, and Our Wayward Fate by Gloria Chow. Those are the books that I swear, if I could get to write something that good, I would be a super happy camper.
And Liz?
Well, you guys just saw my cover. I am on Twitter and Instagram at LZLWSN. It's my name with no vowels. It is really cool. Thank you. And my debut comes out April 7th, 2020. It's called The Lucky Ones, and it's available for pre-sale everywhere. So those pre-sales are important. Yeah. And that's Jeff.
My book is A Heavy Dose of Allison Tandy. It's going out from Putnam Penguin. Sometime. We're a little unclear about the date. But more importantly, you can find me on Instagram at Jeff Cab for Cutie. That's Jeff Cab, the number 4 Cutie, like the band, except it says Jeff instead of Death. It's a pun. Elizabeth, do you get it? Yeah.
Like, I'm going to remember that one, though, so thank you.
All right. So I'm Sarah Nicolas. You can find me on Twitter at Sarah_Nicolas and on Instagram at President Sarah. And I realized someone like reacted to that the other day. It's because I was president of my sorority and people just called me president for like 4 years. So that's where that comes from. We're going to be doing some more video content coming up. So if you could subscribe to my channel here, that would be great. And thank y'all for watching. I'm going to switch the screen over to our Twitter and video chat schedule for the season while we get everyone signed off for the evening. All right, thank y'all for watching tonight. Make sure you check out our upcoming chats, even if you're not necessarily interested in that category. There's still always a lot of great advice in each chat, no matter what category you're writing in. Also, if you want to catch all of the other video chats, you can find them on the playlist that's available at bit.ly/pitchwarslive. And if you want to learn more about Pitch Wars, make sure you go to pitchwars.org. And thank you for tuning in and have a great night.